This week on the Andrew Yang podcast.
I think that the important thing to emphasize, though, is that we are looking for a moral maximum. There are lots of movements out there that are about moral minimums, right? You donate a little bit to charity, you do a little bit of volunteers work, and I'm not against that, right? The whole, doing good by doing well attitude. But I think we live in an era of human history right now where just the minimum is not enough anymore.
It is my distinct pleasure to welcome back to the podcast philosopher, author of, you might know these books, Utopia for Realists and Humankind, and of the brand new book, Moral Ambition, Dutch philosopher Rutger Bregman.
Thanks for having me, Andrew. It's great to be with you in person now.
Yes, it's great to have you too. So you moved to New York recently.
Yep, in September of last year, yeah.
That is wild. So you and I met at TED, what feels like a million years ago, and you were one of the preeminent champions of universal basic income.
Yeah, feels like a century ago, doesn't it?
Feel free to look up Rutger's TED Talk.
I had much more hair back then.
One of the most fun things was, I think it's like poverty is not a lack of character, it's a lack of cash. Couldn't agree more. So you and I have been fellow travelers on the UBI road. Utopia for Realists did a great job making that case.
Yeah, it feels like such a long time ago because also, the zeitgeist in which I was writing that book was so different from today. So back then, my feeling was that we had more or less arrived at the end of history and that, in many respects, we have made incredible progress. Poverty was down, child mortality was down, but that in rich countries, we just didn't really know what was next. And Utopia for Realists was about the crazy ideas that we, might make reality in the future, whether that's abolishing poverty through UBI or, moving to a much shorter work week. There was a lot in that book, just like in your books, about automation and the rise of the robots, which feels, quite prophetic in that respect.
Oh, yeah. AI is real.
Yeah.
So you say you think we're in a different moment now. Like, I think I know what you mean, but go ahead and flesh that out.
Well, I would say it's a bit darker, isn't it?
It is a bit darker.
I was just speaking to the former head of Freedom House, a think tank, that does quite rigorous research on the state of democracy around the globe. And we're now entering the 19th consecutive year where democratic liberties and human rights are declining across the globe. So it's not just in the US that people have good reasons to be worried a little bit about what's going on, but also in other countries. So
what prompted your move to New York? Because you have a family, 2 young kids. It's a very significant decision.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I became a little bit fed up with myself. I had a little bit of an early midlife crisis where I was looking at people in the arena who were actually getting their hands dirty, who were doing things, making things, building things, having some skin in the game. And I experienced this emotion that I sometimes like to describe as moral envy, where you're just jealous.
Wow, I
was just fed up with merely providing commentary on the state of the world and then hoping that some other people would do the actual work of making the world a better place.
Well, this is, by the way, what gets some people to run for office is you're continuously like, I wish someone would run for this. I wish someone would run for that. And then you're like, screw it, I'm going to do it.
Exactly.
So it sounds like that was the impetus. And so you thought your move to New York would bring you closer to?
Yeah, it's a bit of a longer story. So a couple of years ago, I was writing a new book about the great moral pioneers of the past, the abolitionists, the suffragettes who fought for, the women's right to vote, the civil rights campaigners. And I envisioned this big book, 500-600 pages, about how they expanded the moral circle, right? Which is, I think, one of the main ingredients of the moral progress we have made in the last 2 centuries, just that we care about a wider circle of people and maybe also animals. But I was working on the first part of that book about the abolitionists, mainly about the British abolitionists, by the way, because they were by far the most successful. It was a group led by entrepreneurs, also very interesting. So not by writers and intellectuals like me, but people who actually know how to build shit. I was just becoming so inspired. And again, I experienced that emotion of moral envy where I was like, I'm 36. I'm writing this long book about people who did amazing things 2 centuries ago, maybe I should finish this book when I'm 70 or something, and maybe actually do some of that stuff. So that led me to become the co-founder of an organization, the School for Moral Ambition, and also to write a book about what I call moral ambition. And we like to see ourselves as the Robin Hoods of talent. So Robin Hood famously took away the money from the wealthy and gave it to the poor. Well, we take away the talent from, the big corporations where people, are not always doing the most impactful work. And we give it to the most important cause areas of our time. So again, I think there are a lot of connections here. I mean, one of the first books you wrote was Smart People Should Build Things, right? Yeah.
Yeah, no, I mean, you and I are on similar wavelengths for sure. So the School for Moral Ambition, you thought, hey, I should move to New York because it would be a better place to build?
Well, look, we still live in a colonial world, Andrew. So if I do publicity for my books in Spain, I sell books in Spain. If I do publicity for my books in Germany, then I sell books in Germany. If I'm here on the Andrew Yang podcast or, doing any other kind of media, I sell them everywhere. I mean, this is still the place where you have the biggest stage, is the place where you come to if you have a story to share. So we started in Europe last year. As you know, I'm from the Netherlands, which is this tiny little country that no one gives a shit about. So that's a great focus group. It's a great place to test out ideas, see what works. But yeah, from day one, we thought, okay, when Moral Ambition, the book, comes out in English, then we should be here in New York, where you go if you are ambitious.
So is it an actual school? Does it have a physical locus? It sounds like you started it in Europe, but it clearly has like U.S. ambitions, haha.
Yes, absolutely. So we have a place in Amsterdam in the business district there. This is actually how we got started. We had billboards in sort of our tiny little Wall Street in Amsterdam that said, if you're so smart, then why do you work here? We will pay you to quit your job. And now...
So fun.
The goal is to do the same thing here in New York. So we have our offices in Soho, and we want to launch our first fellowships in May of this year, when the book gets published and when people will be listening to this podcast.
Oh my gosh, you're speaking my language now, Rutger, because as you say, I started and ran a fellowship program for young aspiring entrepreneurs for a number of years. So what are you looking for in fellows? How does one apply? And then if you are accepted, what happens?
A couple of things. So I should first say that we follow the Gandalf-Frodo model of changing the world. That requires a bit of explanation, maybe. So
to some.
Well, the story probably. Someday Gandalf knocks on Frodo's door and says, look, there's a pretty bad situation down south. There's this terrible wizard who is risen up and he's going to kill us all unless you throw this ring into that fiery mountain, then you will save us all. So I think it's really important to note that Gandalf never said to Frodo, what's your passion? Right? He didn't really care about Frodo's passion. He said,
that's true.
This is just what needs to be done. That's also how we like to work. So we work with so-called prioritization researchers. This is a new branch of science, of social science, and they make these lists. They stack rank global problems and think really hard about what are some of the most solvable, sizable, and sorely neglected problems out there. So that's like the mission we create for our fellows, and then we open up applications, and it's only for the best of the best. So, well, good for you if you went to Harvard, but that's not nearly enough. I think what we're really trying to do here is...
What's the age range or professional stage?
Or could be any age. Yeah. Like for our current fellowships, on average, I think people have around 10 years of work experience.
Mm-hmm. Okay. So early mid-30s, what that makes me think?
Yeah, quite a few of them. Some are a bit older, some are a bit younger. Most important thing is that you're a really ambitious idealist and that you're just...
So awesome. Okay, so some whippersnapper types, or like any of range 25 to 45, let's say. How many fellows are you trying to recruit this May?
Quite a few, actually. So we're gonna run at least 3 fellowships. One is devoted to a cause area that I care quite a bit about, which is advocating for a more reasonable tax system.
Sounds good to me.
You might remember that moment couple of years ago when they invited me to Davos and I said some nasty things about billionaires who don't pay their fair share in taxation. I'm a big fan of effective philanthropy, but I think we should combine that with paying our fair share. So that is our first plan, is we're going to recruit brilliant bankers, tax specialists, tax lawyers, people who really understand everything about the loopholes. And we're going to convince them to leave the empire and join the Rebel Alliance.
Okay, so if someone manages to get selected as a fellow, is there a certain amount of money or income that accompanies the fellowship?
Yes. So we pay people for 7 months so that they're able to quit their jobs. Some will have to take some pay cut.
That sounds like what's the comp over that 7-month period?
It's about an average American wage.
Well, what is I know generally, but
it's a good question. I know that like a fellow in the US, in Europe, it costs about 50K for us, and in the US about 75K. But there's also the cost of the operational stuff. But what we see in general is that, for most people, it's quite doable. Also because then you're very well placed to find another job somewhere in the ecosystem after that. But look, if you only care about making as much money as possible, then this is not for you.
It's like a means to get by. So I'm just trying to give people the visualization, because some people would probably look to apply. So it sounds like you might get something like $5,000 a month for 7 months, something along those lines.
Something like that. Yeah.
So enough to live, depending upon where you're cited. So if someone were to get in, do they come to New York for that period?
It depends. So what we do is we have a month of training and team building. It's really important that this becomes a very tight cohort. There's this famous quote from Margaret Mead, who said that we should never doubt the power of small groups of thoughtful, committed citizens to change the world. In fact, it's the only thing that ever has. I've also been inspired by someone like Peter Thiel, for example, who wrote this fantastic book on entrepreneurship. I know he's a bit controversial in some circles, but we can learn from entrepreneurs like him.
Wisdom from anyone.
He describes them as cults, which I quite like. Any great startup is a little bit like a cult. It's a group of people who are really, really committed to an idea and are willing to work very hard for it.
Years ago, I looked up the definition of a cult because I started organizations that had some very strong affinities. And one of the interesting things I found, Rutger, you'll be pleased to hear, is that a cult by definition is somewhat negative for its members. And so I was like, is there such a thing as a positive cult? Anyway, I just want to throw that out there.
Well, look, there are trade-offs. In my book, Moral Ambition, I write about these great British abolitionists. And I would have loved to be able to tell a story about how, they all lived happily ever after and they had a perfect work-life balance.
It's one thing I admired about the book is that, you followed the arcs to their completion, but continue.
Yeah, well, one of my favorite abolitionists in there, Thomas Clarkson, some historians see him as like the pivotal figure. And he had an utter and total burnout. After 7 years of work, he couldn't walk the stairs anymore. He had trouble speaking. So that's not good.
Thank you, listeners. Please make sure to like and subscribe. And if you have any questions, send them to mailbag@andrewyang.com, and we'll do our best to answer them. Thank you. I cut you off. So there's moderation of tech is one area, and then you said there were two others.
Yeah. So one is tax fairness. We're also working on food. So if you look at the big problem like climate change, then you can ask the question, what is the most neglected aspects of the fight against climate change? And then the answer is food. It's 20% of emissions. It's mostly meat and dairy. And if you then look at the amount of investment that's going into alternative proteins, which is, in my view, the most promising route towards,
I love these prioritization researchers, man. Continue. So number one is moderation of tech. Number two is food. I like them both so far. And then what's number three?
In number three that we're going to do in the US is actually a little bit different. So it's a Founding to Give fellowship. What we see, if you look at some of the most neglected global problems, is that they're just way too little money. Okay, so if you ask the question like, why are some problems so neglected? Take malaria, 600,000 people die from malaria every year. It's not that we can't solve it, right? We have the technology in principle, we have the talent, but it's just really hard to make money on it. Yeah, so what we're also going to do is to build a little bit of an incubator, convince about a dozen really driven, talented young entrepreneurs who want to build a high-growth startup, basically have the ambition of building a unicorn. But there's one catch. At the beginning of the program, they agree to sign a pledge to donate at least 50% of the money they make when they eventually sell their company to highly effective charities. So that, like from day one, yeah, it's also very much about the altruism and making the world a wildly better place. And not some giving pledge that you do like years later and don't really execute on. Surely you know about that. Quite a few billionaires have signed those pledges, but we're still waiting for the money to come in many cases. So I think that's another thing that's really important to keep in mind is that Margaret Thatcher once said this, the Good Samaritan, he didn't just have good intentions, he also had money. And if we think about some of those really important neglected global problems, we just need way more money.
Rutger, I love the scope of this vision and also that you're operationalizing it in this way. You're making it concrete. So moderation of tech, food, and found to give, all very, very sensible.
I've got one other example for you that we're working on in Europe. And this was a big surprise for me, actually. So our researchers came to us and said, well, probably at the top of the list right now in Europe is fighting big tobacco. And I was like, huh? But we've done that, right? Like, it feels so 90s to me. But they said, look, it's the single largest preventable cause of disease, smoking. It's 8 million deaths every year, which is like more than 10 times as big as malaria. It's more than 100 times as big as natural disasters. And there's almost no one working on it. It's super neglected because it's not sexy, right? It's just not, if you say that at a birthday party.
It feels kind of retro. It's true.
Yeah, exactly. So that's why we exist. We try to make the unsexy things more sexy.
Well, your objective. So again, congrats. I mean, that sounds like a fine mission. Who's funding the fellowships?
Yeah, mostly me right now.
So impressive.
Yeah. So
he's walking the walk, people, because Rutger's not, some made of money guy. He's a writer, scholar, visionary. So he's digging deep. That's very impressive.
Well, it's not just me, but everything I earn with the book is all going into the movement.
Lovely.
And we have a group of so-called founding funders. Most of them are entrepreneurs or impact investors who have already built great companies and who
man,
are building their second
mountain. You passed the hat. You raised some money. The book obviously, is going to become a messaging device, but also partially a fundraising device.
Yep.
If someone is so struck by this and says, "Hey, I want to, donate to the School of Moral Ambition," can they do so?
Absolutely.
Oh, really? And what's the website?
Moralambition.org. And really everyone is welcome. So it's not just the fellowships that we're running, and that's quite exclusive. I'll be honest, it's a lot of people want to get in, and it's very, very hard.
Yeah.
It's only for the best of the best.
Yeah, you could scale it if you had, the resources. How many fellows are you looking at this year?
I think 30.
I mean, 30 is a lot.
Yeah.
You can do the math on that.
Yeah. Yeah, that's true.
As someone who's run a fellowship program, I mean, we started with 40, and it was a lot. It's a lot of humans.
Yeah.
So, moralambition.org. One thing they can obviously do is they can buy the book, and then that has a couple of benefits. I mean, they have a book, and also that money will go towards the school.
Absolutely. And what we've also done is we've created a program, the so-called Moral Ambition Circles, and that's freely accessible for everyone. So everyone who has this feeling like, I also feel somewhat stuck in my job, and I also wonder sometimes what's happened to my great ideals and dreams. When I was in college, I still wanted to solve global hunger, but here I am at, McKinsey or something. We have lots of people who have joined a so-called Moral Ambition Circle. It's a group of 6 to 8 people who come together for 7 evenings and try to find out what are my super talents? What are some of the greatest challenges we're currently neglecting? What's the first step I can take? And how can we support one another? How can we hold each other accountable? And it's been pretty cool to see that in Europe, we already have, almost 200 pledges right now of people who, have made a pretty significant pledge to either give up their job or to become an intrapreneur, because, that's also sometimes quite valuable.
You mean within the corporate?
Yeah, exactly. That you're a rebel, within a big corporation.
Or you can drive some corporate resources towards something very wholesome.
Yep. So, I'm not married to a specific method, right? There are many tools in the toolkit.
Yeah, I know. It's true. I mean, I gave a graduation speech to Columbia Law School where I went.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the things I said is look, if you're at that job, it's fine. I'm not asking everyone here to quit your job. But just when the person asks you for help them,
Yep.
And that can be, sometimes channeling corporate resources.
Yeah. I think that the important thing to emphasize, though, is that we are looking for a moral maximum. There are lots of movements out there that are about moral minimums, right? You donate a little bit to charity, you do a little bit of volunteers work. And I'm not against that, right? The whole doing good by doing well attitude. But I think we live in an era of human history right now where just the minimum is not enough anymore.
This podcast is sponsored by Helix Sleep. Sometimes you wake up on the wrong side of the bed, your back hurts, your neck aches, you don't have the energy you want. You know what? It might be your mattress. And you know one great way to find out? Get a new one. Go to Helix Sleep and take their sleep quiz, get a personalized mattress sent to your door with a money-back guarantee. I know, people can try a mattress and then turn it around. I've been using my Helix Ultra Dawn Firm mattress for months and months, and it has been a game changer for me. And what's wild is that my kids seek it out, even though it was not made with them in mind. I'm sure if they took their sleep quiz, it would have said soft, 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 or whatever the heck kids like. Anyway, check out Helix Sleep for snoring, back pain, sleep apnea, just sleeping through the night, too hot, too cold. Helix Sleep can help. Go to helixsleep.com/yang for 27% off site-wide plus free bedding bundle, sheet set, and mattress protector with any Luxe or Elite mattress order. That's helixsleep.com/yang for 27% off site-wide plus free bedding bundle, sheet set, and mattress protector with any Luxe or Elite mattress order. Exclusive for listeners to the Andrew Yang podcast. helixsleep.com/yang. So I'm going to get personal for a minute, Rutger, and I really admire what you're doing and how concrete you are and how committed you are. And so I'm going to relate a story. Some people, I don't know how many of you all know this. So I started a nonprofit when I was 36 years old called Venture for America.
That's my age.
Yeah. Look at this. I know. I mean, geez, I don't know. So anyway, I'm forecasting that Rutger is going to, run for president in some country or another.
I can't. I'm not an American.
No, instead of some country. I mean, you could go back to the Netherlands. I mean, you can do whatever. When someone asked, why did you run for president? It was actually an extension of the decision I made when I was 36 years old to start Venture for America. Because when I started Venture for America, it was like I have a vision of like all of these entrepreneurs going out and solving problems around the country. And the mission was, the revitalization of America. And then I concluded in order to actually revitalize America, like I would need to, do very dramatic things like universal basic income and measure the economy differently and a bunch of others. So the benefits of my running, what got me to run was that I thought I could advance the human condition. I thought I could mainstream universal basic income. I thought I could explain AI and the fourth industrial revolution to the American people. And so I saw it actually as like a morality thing. I was like, look, I can fall on my face during this presidential run and I'll be able to sleep at night because at least I tried. Like if I get humiliated, at least I tried. I mean, like that there was like a so that was like a values thing.
I very much recognize that. So I gotta say that my previous life was much easier. If you're just a writer, a book is a very well-defined project, right? You're just the dictator of your own book, and you can change if you want to make a change, you make the change, right? It's super easy. You don't have to go to a board or anything like that. You don't need to get the votes.
Plus, you have 2 young kids, and by the way, I became a dad in the early years of Venture for America.
Yeah. That also makes it a little bit harder. At the same time, though, even though I had, many more setbacks in the last year and a half than probably in, the decade before that, I feel so much more alive. Just the feeling of being in the arena, the famous Theodore Roosevelt quote.
Of course.
It's not the critic who counts, it's the people who are actually doing the work.
Yep.
Like, that gives me enormous satisfaction that people
Good
can
for you,
never
man.
complain about me anymore, that I was just expressing my opinion. I'm actually trying something.
Yes.
I'm not sure if we'll achieve all our dreams. I mean, you haven't achieved all your dreams, but you've been successful in many respects.
No, I'm kidding. I haven't. Well, yeah, no. I run into the limitations of my ability to accomplish my dreams just about every day.
Yeah. And I was recently joking with a friend, like, if you just see the enormous wave of basic income experiments across the US. I mean, at some point we'll have basic income because everyone's enrolled in an experiment, right?
God willing.
And that was unthinkable when you and I started writing and talking about this. It was such a forgotten idea. The whole notion of giving people free money sounded bizarre and outlandish to most people we spoke to. And it took a lot of work to make this an idea that has really entered the mainstream. If you look at the extraordinary growth of an NGO like Give Directly, I mean, I was recently speaking to their CEO. They're giving away $250 million now every year.
Incredible.
In very poor countries.
Saving
they
a lot
have
of
the
lives.
ambition right now to lift the whole country up out of poverty. I mean, when we spoke about that 10, 15 years ago, that was total utopia to even
like
say that.
8 years ago, but it's fine.
Yeah, okay, 8 years ago.
I mean, my presidential
campaign
campaign was,
Yeah.
I suppose 6 years ago, 5.5 years ago, something along those lines.
Yeah. So in a way, you
Which,
don't
by the way,
always
blows my
achieve
mind.
the dreams you wanna achieve, and obviously politically things are going in a little bit of a different direction in the US.
This podcast is sponsored by ExpressVPN. How did you choose which internet service provider to use? The sad thing is, most of us didn't have much of a choice because ISPs operate a lot like monopolies in the regions that they serve. They then use this monopoly position to take advantage of customers, and yes, they even sell your data, your activities to advertisers and big tech companies, and you don't see a dime. That's why I protect my internet surfing and devices with ExpressVPN. When you use ExpressVPN, it's like a magic portal to a perfectly safe and anonymous internet. And don't take my word for it. This is the #1 VPN service according to CNET. It's used by major companies all over the world. So stop handing over your personal data to ISPs and other tech companies who then mine your activity and sell off your information. Protect yourself with a VPN I trust to keep my privacy online. Visit expressvpn.com/yang. That's expressvpn.com/yang to get 3 extra months free. Go to expressvpn.com/yang right now to learn more. And so this moral ambition argument you're making, it has multiple facets, and I'd like to try and run down one or two of them at least. So number one is like misallocation of human capital. Most people would look at that and say, you can't disagree with that.
Yeah.
And so then the question is like, what can you do to create awesome alternatives? So most people are just trying to get by.
Yeah.
And so then for them, it's like, okay, like if I can get by a little bit better, then that's a win. And then there are some people that are fortunate where it's like, I could do a range of things. Yeah. I can survive in different ways. Yeah. So number one is misallocation of talent. Number two is people doing more and better from within their positions. And there are a lot of people, not a lot, like some number of people that are in positions where they could make massive changes that are not making those changes in part because, a lot of it's financial incentives. But I'll just throw an example. The first example that came to my mind, Mark Zuckerberg. Mm-hmm. He could wake up tomorrow and be like, you know what, like this algorithm, this ad-driven model, not so good. Like we should definitely not have any thing to do with having teenage girls on like any of these platforms. Like we should be pushing them out. Like maybe be doing a lot of like wholesome things.
Well, he could lift the whole country out of poverty.
Yeah.
I could get him the CEO of Give Directly on the line, and that's like a money pit where you can cost effectively, do an enormous amount of philanthropy and make history.
Yes. So column number 1 is like, hey, professional choices. Column number 2 is there are a bunch of needle movers who, if they decided to move the needle, like things could shift fairly dramatically. Like column number 2 is actually a real frustration of mine. Now, you and I are rare birds in that what we've done is we've extricated ourselves from the economic system and said, look, I'm going to create incentives for myself, and I have the resources or the network or whatever to try and energize like that direction. And now for something like Forward, which people listening to this or watching this are, familiar with, it's like, look, we're going to try and fix the American political system. It's going to require a lot of resources and whatnot. Like, feel free to chip in your money and your time. And because some people think it's, the right thing to do, which by the way, it is the right thing to do. And even now, Ezra Klein is saying like, yeah, you kind of need a positive independent political, entity to compete in red states where the Democratic name is underwater, which by the way, now it's a lot of places. And so you try and galvanize resources and create your own market. And that's the place you're in right now, where like you are going to folks and saying, hey, the School for Moral Ambition is a great idea. You should fund it. There's a better use of your resources than whatever else you're doing.
Yeah, there's so many thoughts I have about this. So I'd love to share my ground theory of how we're going to change the system and change also the incentives, because you're very right that the current incentives are pushing people in the wrong direction.
Yeah.
So first, I'd like to double down on just how extraordinary the waste of talent that is.
For sure.
What's going on. So take a university like Harvard. 45% of Harvard graduates go into consultancy or finance.
Yep.
I think about 20% into tech. Some of those do great things, but many of them end up building, pretty silly startups, in my view. So that is an enormous waste of talent. We're talking about, I'm not saying like Harvard is some kind of pure meritocracy. I mean, 1 in 6 come from the richest 1%.
You could slot in any of 20 schools in there.
But many of these people go on and do great things, and they don't. Now, the question is, why don't they do it? Most people would say it's all about the money. And sure, that does play a role.
Well, it's the incentive structure.
I would say, though, that one of the more important things is how we have defined success and status.
Agreed.
So there's a survey that's been going on in the US since the late 60s, early 70s, the American Freshman Survey, where students were asked and are still being asked, what are some of your most important life goals? List them for us. And in the 1960s, about 90% of students said that developing a meaningful philosophy of life was the most important life goal.
Oh, yeah. You used to have late night conversations and read Herman Hesse and things like that.
Yeah, and today that's down to 50%. Back then, only 50% said that becoming financially very well off was their main life goal. Today, that's 80 to 90%. So the numbers have reversed, basically. Now, that is not human nature. That is culture. So as I studied some of these great moral pioneers of the past and some of these great movements, what it dawned on me after a while that they were part of big culture shifts. So this is true for the British abolitionists. It's also true for the US when it moved from the Gilded Era to the Progressive Era. Take someone like Theodore Roosevelt. He was a Harvard graduate, right, who grew up in the Gilded Era. There were other people back then who basically changed their mind or were swept up in this new cultural wave where people were like, you know what? We should redefine what it means to be successful. We've been climbing the wrong ladder all along. Sure, money isn't dirty. I mean, you need capital to make changes in this world. But it's a little bit boring, to be chasing that your whole life, After some point, it's time to think about, as David Brooks would say, what's your second mountain? Like, well, how are you really going to make impact and build a legacy that actually matters? So some of these abolitionists who, financed that movement were very wealthy, had built great companies. The reason we historians still remember them today is not because they were wealthy. I mean, I've met a lot of wealthy people in my life. Quite a few of them are pretty boring, I can assure you. some of them are exceptional because they have much bigger dreams, much bigger ideals. And yeah, those are the kind of people that we historians love to write about, 100 years later. So that is basically my simple theory of change, that it has to be possible that we change the definition of success once again. And I think you've just been a little bit unlucky, Andrew, is that you were a little bit ahead of the curve.
Well, so, I mean, I'd love to relate some of these things, Rutger. So first, the reversal of the, hey, like I need a value system and moral view of the world by the time I graduate from college, and hey, I need financial success. Those things reversing, man, I mean, it breaks my heart because I think a generation ago, if you were, a college student, you were like, look, and I might even resemble this. Look, I'm going to make enough money to live a fine life, regardless of whether I, choose like the most lucrative profession or I do like the more interesting back roads, like roundabout path. Like I'm going to be fine regardless. And Americans have started doubting that truth. Yeah. Because now you have like more of this winner take all dynamic. But you talk to young people today and there's a sense that, oh man, if I don't get a job at one of these firms in one of these industries, I'm going to end up being like left behind, cast out. And some of that I think is psychic and cultural, but some of it's actually being driven by economics that have gotten really out of whack. So that stuff makes me super sad. Now, I'm someone who agrees with you that if you had more people questioning like, their values and why they do what they do, not necessarily their passion or what they'd enjoy, but it's like, look, like what makes you a good person? What's going to make you feel like you left it all out in the field? What's going to make you feel like, okay, win or lose, my career is going to be something I'm proud of? Like those things are harder to come by for people. And I think part of it is a change in circumstance.
Sure.
Which makes me sad.
Yeah. The first time Donald Trump was elected, 2016, progressives and Democrats went on this endless soul-searching journey. You remember all these articles on Vox.com and the New York Times, The Atlantic, about how could this have happened? Like, we need more empathy. We need to listen to the other side. And when Trump was reelected once again, I was really like, can we please not do that again? Because what we need right now is not a lot of talk and blah, blah. We need to actually, start building stuff and practicing what we preach. I think that people are just really fed up with a liberalism that is mainly about, how do you say that? Expressing the right emotions and saying the right things, policing certain words, that is just utterly unambitious. And you see that everywhere. So take the environmental movement, for example. Big parts of the environmental movement have become obsessed with stuff like personal footprints, for example. And then there are all kinds of rules. You don't fly, you don't eat meat, you don't use plastic straws, you can't even have kids, because, that's all bad for the environment.
Yeah,
but in the best scenario, you might as well not have existed, because
that's one way to reduce your carbon footprint.
A zero footprint, and like death is the highest ideal, right?
Oh no, it's so dark. To continue though.
It's and again, it's utterly unambitious. You see the same thing with slogans like check your privilege, right? Make place for others, shut your mouth. It's just utterly uninspiring. Like, our slogan would be not check your privilege, but use your privilege, right?
Yeah.
Use what you have.
I'm into that.
Your cultural capital, your financial capital, your human capital. Use it and build things.
This podcast is sponsored by Factor. The weather's getting better. We want to get outside instead of spending all of our time prepping meals and cooking, especially if you can't cook like me. Evelyn was not into eating my cooking, shall we say. That's where Factor has been a total game changer. Instead of chopping and cooking, I grab a ready-made meal from the fridge, pop it in the microwave, and in 2 minutes, I've got something delicious and satisfying. With 45 weekly menu options, you can pick gourmet meals that fit your goals. You can choose from Calorie Smart, Protein Plus, Keto, and more, and it tastes great. You feel like you're doing the right thing by yourself. Factor has my back for busy mornings too, with quick breakfasts and lunches I can take on the go, plus snacks and desserts that seriously hit the spot. Get started at factormeals.com/yang50off and use code yang50off to get 50% off plus free shipping on your first box. That's code yang50off at factormeals.com/yang50off for 50% off plus free shipping. I've had like a fascinating career. I'm proud of it. I'm proud of it, win or lose, to your point. And one of the things that I've always tried to be good about is to have something that drives me that's not the market or feedback in any given moment. Now, that's extraordinarily privileged because the vast majority of people just need to survive within the market at any given moment. And like in my advice, by the way, to those Columbia Law graduates is like what you should aspire to do is create your own market, which is a very rare thing. And I'm grateful to everyone who supported me to enable me to try and do what I think is right without, having to freak out about, like paying the bills. I mean, thank you, for everyone who believed in my campaigns, donated to Forward or Humanity Forward, or just tune in, like whatever. And please know that I'm still trying to make your life better. And then sometimes people ask me questions about in like my direction or path. And I've had remarkable successes in part because the scope of my ambitions were very, very expansive. Like I ran for president, didn't win, obviously, but wound up with really interesting and amazing relationships and networks and opportunities as a result of that.
In the last 2 years, I learned two really interesting things about ambition. One is that it's often easier to be more ambitious than to be less ambitious because ambition attracts ambition. It just becomes easier to people raise, right? Which is, it's not just fundraising, but it's also finding the right people to work with.
Yeah.
And if you share big dreams, like I want to become president of the United States, that acts like a magnet.
I want to alleviate poverty
exactly.
in our time, which, by the way, I wanted to make a very strong observation. GDP in the United States of America is up to $82,000 per person, and AI is just going to increase that. So despite all of the deprivation and dysfunction and scarcity, objectively, we should be able to alleviate poverty in the United States of America.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I mean,
but we've always been able to
by the numbers, by the math.
Yeah. It's relatively cheap and cost effective.
And we get a lot of it back.
It would be, well,
maybe,
I would say
maybe multiples.
I would say that. Yeah. That's an investment that will pay for itself.
Yeah,
child poverty is incredibly expensive.
Child poverty is incredibly expensive.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. So that's one thing I learned. The other thing is how contagious ambition is. This is actually I learned from one of our colleagues, the podcaster Tyler Cowen. He wrote this great blog a while ago where he said that it's one of the most valuable and one of the most cost-effective uses of your time to just approach other people and say, "Hey, I see what you're doing. I think you can do twice as much," or why not dream bigger? It costs you almost nothing to do that, and it can have a very big impact on that person and for the whole world. So when I read that, I was like, can't we create a machine around that insight to basically increase people's level of ambition? I've experienced that in my own personal life, is that I had a few people around me who were basically saying to me like, Rutger, well, very nice that you've sold a couple of books that did pretty well, but is this it? Is that what you're going to do the rest of your career? You can dream bigger, man.
I have to say, people generally don't accuse me of not dreaming big enough. Running for president will do that for you. Mm-hmm. I love the vision. I love literally the moral ambition. And one of my jokes, but it happens to be totally true, it's like, who the heck came and worked on the Yang campaign in 2020? It was not some careerist who was like, oh, this is going to be like my straight shot to Capitol Hill. It's like, hey, I actually want to try and alleviate poverty in our time. And I think that this guy is, making the right case. And so the people that have been around me have been awesome people who have then met other awesome people. And then in some cases even like formed families and like had careers. I went back and spoke at my alma mater, Brown University. Shout out to Brown. And it made me realize like just how far I've come I believe that, and the reason why I'm able to do anything helpful is because there's been this like incredible layer of cumulative experiences that are now built up over decades. Just like for you, it's like, how can you start the School for Moral Ambition? It's because, well, I like sold a gajillion like books and this, and it's going to lead to this. And then even as you have setbacks, it's like, oh, you kind of become more resilient. You grow. Like that's the arc that I think most people don't know that they have in them. And that happens to reflect some of the best change makers I know, even in the fact that, obviously, like if you send a bunch of people down like a difficult path, like not everyone's going to be a role model or success, but most of them will be like successes on a personal level. Most of them will be people that you're glad to know. Yeah.
And then at the same time, it is important to keep in mind that, your late teens and early 20s, it's a very special period in your life, right? I always like to say that it's the period in which people write their constitution, right, for the rest of their lives.
What proportion of people do you think have forgotten their constitution?
Well, some do, but some people just don't write the right constitution in their early teens and 20s, and so then they get snatched up by the McKinseys or the Goldman Sachses. That was one reason when I wanted to write this book. Actually, initially, I had written a bit more pessimistic version where I was like, look, if you're past the age of 30, if you have a Labradoodle and a mortgage, then, probably this book is not for you, because people rarely really change their life after the age of 30. I've now changed my mind on that because I've seen quite a few examples of that.
I mean, you changed your life post 30.
That's true. But I think the mixture of idealism, ambition, and a little bit of vanity was always there, which is, by the way, I think is okay.
Yeah,
right?
It's fine.
We don't have all to be like born altruist, where it's all about, let's save the world, and that's what it's all about. No, it's also about making your mark and trying to live a meaningful life. That is something that has driven me from my
that was clear certainly for years, man. Ever since I saw the TED Talk, and I was in the crowd at TED when you gave the UBI TED Talk. Martin Ford was there too, in the automation. I mean, like that was like a very special gathering. But it's even more special that you've just been freaking leveling up and grinding and trying to make good things happen ever since then. And here we are. Let's call it 8 years later, which is actually about almost exactly right. Yeah. And you're launching a freaking School for Moral Ambition. Man, my hat's off to you. And I admire you. I consider you a fellow warrior for Utopia. And I hope to be helpful. How can people apply, donate, keep track of your work? Is it moralambition.org?
Yeah. That's really it. The book has just come out, I think, when this podcast will be published.
It's like freaking week one.
It's very much a movement. We invite everyone to join and to support us. Right now, we have offices in Amsterdam and New York, but, I'm pretty ambitious. So like a decade from now.
Holy cow, guys. You might be the head of the School for Moral Ambition in Asia.
Yeah, why not?
South America or Africa.
Exactly.
Am I missing a continent?
Yeah.
Antarctica. Why not?
Yeah.
There needs to be moral ambition in every continent.
Yeah.
Well, and how can people best keep up with you and your work, Rutger?
Well, got my website, rutgerbregman.com.
Rutgerbregman.com. I'm so excited for you, man. And I'm so glad that now you're here in New York and we'll see more of each other.
Thanks, Andrew.